Welcome to Soul Mechanics. Prepare for battle. I found this helmet on my way home the other day in a shopping cart in the middle of the street. I mean, I ride a bike most of the time. My bike's busted right now, but how cool is that? Somebody just left that in the middle of the street.
Piper, you bastard!
Piper is a fucking bastard. Piper ruins everything, I'm telling you. The rain in Cleveland and Piper. That's all we need to get rid of in the world. Will be perfect. I wanna take this chance. This video is just to ramble on hypotheticals because we raise the questions, very important queries, which I want to make very clear immediately here. That we have the questions. For example, if you have a prophecy, if you predict the future, which prediction is going to be a primary element in everything that we're dealing with going forward. If you predict the future and you foresee something coming and then it happens, did you see what was going to happen in the future, or did you cause for the future to happen that way? And this comes into play because we have the observer principle in effect. Now, I guess I'm thinking quantum mechanics, or our understanding of quantum mechanics, hasn't actually established the observer principle as a principal dynamic yet, but they will. And I think that what we're going to do here, from my perspective at least, is just go ahead and jump ahead and consider that to be an element in play, because it is a factor. They're going to realize that this is an effect, and that our observation, our presence itself is an immediate and functioning directive, that our observation itself, our very consciousness, has a directive influence upon the creation of reality as it's happening. So somehow you're directing things to happen. You are directing reality to transpire. And this is how intuition is going to work. And speaking of intuition from another perspective, if we want to get into, I'm going to go ahead and coin the phrase dimensionality here. There's another jumping forward we're going to do. Dimensionality is going to be where we misuse the term dimension, but properly misuse it, because it does speak to the folding of time-space. If I'm going to bring you guys to understanding and actually seeing and experiencing a fourth dimension, it's a fourth spatial dimension. You're going to need to understand that space and comprehension are the same thing. When you explore the boundary, which is what the Remnants program is ultimately intended to do, to explore the boundary and to bring back what we find and use it to construct a functioning paradigm, a new paradigm, and a method of understanding reality that will allow for us to make use of this directive relativity, which is another factor that's going to come into play. We will eventually have a theory and then a reality of directive relativity in play, that is going to come off of that observer principle, which, like I said, I don't think they have established that yet, but they're going to. Now, where we speak to intuition, we have a perpetual self that's going to be not separated from us, but another aspect of us that where we're coming from, the world that we're living in. And again, I want to make it very clear. I know that I'm rambling here, and you guys, I'm trailing off. But I already said this is going to be a tangential video. I'm just going to ramble here about hypotheticals. But where you have a perpetual self existing, it's living a life. This perpetual self is living a life that you're ultimately, for the most part, kind of entirely unaware of. You are the subconscious factor. This world that we're experiencing, this is our subconscious, and there is a greater consciousness, a super conscious presence, you could say, that's influencing and directing things. So immediately, where we consider this, that we have this perpetual self running the show, and we're not really aware of what it's doing, and the factor that, for whatever reason, we are, it could be exploring the self, or it could be escaping a reality. This is where I'm coming from when I speak to it. The ultimate soul that we are, one soul, is tricking itself. It's playing a magic trick on itself to cause for each of us to believe that we are somehow separated. And as I was saying, I want to make it very clear that the reason that I come across so strange, and you guys might have trouble understanding me, and I do ramble and tangential, is because I'm not really living in the same world as most of you. Where I came up, this all, understanding us all as being one part, reflecting off of each other, understanding that there is one greater soul and that we are all a part of it, and that we are in fact living in a kind of dissociative identity disorder. For the most part, it may not be a disorder, it might be perfectly functional, but it is in fact a dissociative identity. This is common sense to me. This has always been common sense to me. I've never ever lived in a world where we consider people to be separated and distinct from us. Everything is reflective. We're all one soul, we're all one family, we're all one people. And that's where I'm coming from. That's the world that I'm living in. I've never lived in a world where I look at people and consider them to be something separated from me in any realistic way. So that's where I'm coming from, and that's going to speak to dimensionality again, right there, because we have this dimension in play where we consider dimensions as being something other than spatial, as being comprehensive. That's speaking to the fourth dimension. That's coming close to what it is, where we have, for example, the boundary. In psychology, we have that distinction between implicit and explicit. That's an ultimate idea. That's like a factor that's in play above and beyond all things. That's going to be a part of the actual operating system, is this idea that there's implicit and explicit interactions, where in fact there aren't, because you are existing within your own reasoning. This all is a show that you're playing, that we're all playing together. We're all one part of one thing that's operating. So there really is no implicit and explicit. What is explicit is existing within your own consideration, and what is implicit is pretty much just you kind of hiding from yourself. I mean, there is no real distinction between it. It's the same thing. You can't be implicit or explicit. Everything's existing within your mind. So that's where you reach the boundary with this paradox, that we see this existing, but it's not actually real. We observe it, and it makes it seem as though if you explore that philosophically, as the philosophers do, is speaking to the absurdity of philosophy, and how they just kind of trail off into these considerations of breaking their thoughts and their considerations themselves into pieces and observing them. It's fun and it's worthwhile, but Socrates and Plato, these guys have already gone ahead and done it. It's done. We don't. There's nothing to find there. I'm telling you. We're trying to make something in this outer world. Exploring the boundary. That for the Remnants program specifically, we want to try and find what's beyond it. We want to try and get beyond it, but we're not moving fast enough for that yet. And we do coordinate, and we have the other groups coordinating. We have the network in play, but we are not getting it yet, because I think that's problem is where I'm coming across when I'm speaking to this fourth dimension. You guys aren't understanding what I'm actually meaning to say. This is speaking to the nature of comprehension itself. That our understanding is a spatial quality. Our reasoning, our comprehension is it is space. It's a part of what space is, and ultimately there is no time in reality. This is now, and everything is unfolds from that. Everything is kind of like a hallucination that's unfolding from this single point, wherein we are one-dimensional. But I know this is crazy. But I wanted to just ramble about this because it's so fascinating. Where we speak to the perpetual self as giving us communications that's intuitive, and we have intuitions coming from the greater self, and then intuitions come into play where we actually are communicating with ourself. Throughout the Principal Dynamics series, we speak about consistent communication, where we're constantly communicating with ourselves, and we're communicating with ourselves through other people, through other objects, through the world. We are resounding, getting feedback with communications to and from ourselves. So that all comes into play with intuition. You hear somebody say something that might be intuitive, it might lead you to something, and that's because that person is actually communicating to you. You're not just eavesdropping on something, that's the world directly communicating to you. And you're constantly doing this all the time. You just don't know it. You're not taking aware of it because you're living in a world where you believe that we are separated. So that's a difficult like I said, that's going to be a boundary that exists between us already. That's going to be a part of the divide, where the actual divide is the division between yourself and your reality. That is, it's a, as Little Washi would say, if she happens to watch this, hey lady, you're fucking awesome. I love you, just kick ass, and I'm having a lot of fun with you, breaking me into pieces and inspecting me. Although I'd like you to know that I am in fact kind of observing you as a specimen at the same time. So that's gonna be. She thinks that I'm schizophrenic, and if I fit the symptoms, maybe, but also. I'm finding that a lot of these symptoms with schizophrenia and such, and anxiety disorders, and a lot of what we term to be mental illnesses, that again, we really don't understand these things. Psychology is a logy. It's what we expect, it's what we think is happening, but we don't know. It's all theoretical. So, when we speak to things like schizophrenia, pretty much that diagnosis is saying, well, we really don't know what's going on. We're going to try and treat the symptoms as best we can, but we don't know what's going on. And the reason they don't know what's going on is because the medical community has tossed the elder traditions and everything that they gave us that we understand, primarily because they know that it's the clue. It's the key. They know whoever's orchestrating the show. I mean, I'm sure that, I don't like to think of like conspiracy theories, like there's some cult running the show, but there actually is. That's happening. That's not bullshit. There are, people that are creating social programming and orchestrating social programming that's in play. If you can see it happening, you're going to see it everywhere. I mean, it's obvious that this is happening. So, I mean, it's not like a wacky conspiracy theory. It's an obvious fact of the matter. But in that sense where we have social programming communicating with us, we have ourselves communicating with us, and then there's the fact that our actual self, has a mind of its own. It's living its own life, and it's directing us for purposes that we're not really aware of. If you can move fast enough to see the reasons in play, the values happening, then you can understand the reasoning of it to a certain extent. If you can move fast enough to get ahead and see the potentialities and consequences that are in play, and kind of dictate what's going to happen in that sense, prediction. If you can predict what's going to happen fast enough, and you can actually get ahead of it, and it does happen, then you can kind of get ahead and directly influence your intuition as it's happening, and direct your perpetual self in a sense to achieve a kind of a fusion with the perpetual self, and sort of remember who you are. That's going to be the point of all of this, is remembering who you are, achieving lucidity. Remember is happening. Remember, now. It's not something that you've necessarily forgotten. It's something that you are in the process of forgetting. It's all happening now. So, I gotta finish this up real quick. When we speak to that, there's an issue of trust here that comes into play, and everybody's going to have this. If you observe yourself, if you examine yourself, a lot of people are afraid to go ahead and examine themselves, but I highly suggest it. You're going to find that you have this issue of trust in yourself, whether you trust yourself, and there's a good reason for that, because you don't know what your perpetual self is doing most of the time. If you can achieve a fusion with it, you can have an idea, but it's not lasting. You're going to lose it. Some people, like super awesome monks out in the fucking wilderness, I'm sure have achieved a consistent lucidity, and that's what we're going to be trying to do here. But it's going to be one of the goals. But it's very difficult, especially when you have a lot going on in the world and you need to be dealing with it. You become a key player. You become a key factor in the world around you and influencing the world around you. It's a major distraction, but you are playing the game. You are having fun, and that's the point of it. There is no higher meaning than our connection to each other. There is no greater meaning than our relationships. But as I said, there's an issue of trust that's going to come into play, and then at the same time we have what might be these spirits. We don't know if these spirits that I experienced are real or not. I could very well have been hallucinating, but I'm telling you, I have a great deal of experience with hallucination. Trust me, I know what the difference between a hallucination and reality. So I'm telling you that this is something, and again, reality itself is a hallucination, so it's pointless to even say that really, but I know that it was something was happening, that it was real. There's a distinction between hallucination and a real something happening, and if you have this experience, you're going to know that yourself too. I've got this girl in the corner who keeps saying, "Hey baby, come on my dear." She's like she has a fake profile. It's probably a dude, you know, trying to get me to marry them, I guess. Sorry, but if these spirits are in play and they can communicate through you as it did with me, like a channeling sort of thing, obviously it could be a directive influence on your intuition, so you can't trust that either. Now you have potential forces in play that you're unaware of. If these things can attach to you, that's a question to raise. So that I guess this is going to be speaking ultimately to those questions. A, you know, the observer principle in play. If you foresee the future, did you see it coming as it happened, or as it will happen, or did you make it happen? And then with intuition, A, our intuitions, our intuitive cues happening as it, you know, as we speak, are they being directed to you, or are they already there in play without any directive influence? Have they just already been placed and you're kind of seeing them? I'm not sure if I'm getting it across well enough for you guys to really understand the question we're asking here, but these two questions also with B, could it be other forces other than yourself? Which again, it's so difficult to get into this. This is where we get into kind of absurd philosophical ideologies, where it's just it's rambling like I'm doing right now. But you don't know. That's going to be I guess a pointer to put in play in the game as you're playing, is you don't really know a lot of the time whether something belongs to you or not, whether an intuition is actually yours or you're being directed by some other force outside of what you consider to be yourself, this eidolon, this immediate ephemeral self. So I guess that's the ultimate question to put into play. Like, who are you? That's really the point of it all. That's always been the point of it all. Is who are you? Like, you don't, from our perspective as we stand, we don't know what's really happening. In any case, I gotta cut this short. Thank you guys for watching. Kilo Salai, Terbi Uni Siari. Namaste.